So Impact Wrestling Slammiversary is getting nearer and nearer. It's on the horizon, of course, in July. And possibly we have a massive match set to be announced for Slammiversary next month regarding the X Division Championship. Now, Impact Wrestling is set to make a big Slammiversary announcement tomorrow on Thursday regarding possibly the X Division Championship. Now, George Iceman, host of Iceman's Intel, the segment on Before the Impact, which airs, of course, ironically, before Impact Wrestling every Thursday night, noted on Twitter yesterday that he is hearing rumors of a, quote, dangerous stipulation match in the works for the Slammiversary pay-per-view. Now, Impact has since retweeted this post and said that an official announcement will be coming up at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. Now, as to what that match is, no word is yet as to what it's actually going to be. There's no word yet on what match is going to actually be announced, but PW Insider recently speculated that the Ultimate X match will be brought back for Slammiversary. X Division champion Josh Alexander is currently being pushed after it was reported that the company wants to build the X Division Championship up in a major way and have it on a level playing field to the Impact World Championship, seemingly with Josh Alexander competing in numerous big high-profile matches, such as an Iron Man match against people outside the company, like El Fantasma of New Japan Pro Wrestling, possibly now in an X Division Championship match at Slammiversary that's going to be an Ultimate X match. Now, again, this is what PW Insider is speculating on. For me, I don't totally know if I really buy into it, and I'm not just saying this because this was my prediction, but I'm still leaning towards it possibly being a King of the Mountain match. Why? Well, I think there's numerous indicators that would say that this is the direction that they're going in. First of all, Josh Alexander, prior to Against All Odds last week, Josh Alexander did mention that he was the King of the Mountain. That's a pretty subtle hint, right? It's not that subtle at all, really, is it? Him saying it's the King of the Mountain and having Slammiversary around the corner, people's ears started to prick up a little bit, didn't they? Well, of course, this past Saturday at Against All Odds, we had a fatal five-way match with the winner becoming the number one contender for the X Division Championship. We had Ace Austin, Rohit Raju, Chris Bay, Trey Miguel, and P.T. Williams all competing to be the next contender for that X Division Championship. Well, we didn't get a finish, of course, because Madman Fulton, Ace Austin's associate, bodyguard, whatever you want to call him, he came out, attacked everyone, seemingly allowing Ace Austin to pick up the victory and become the number one contender for the X Division Championship. But the referee, to his credit, said, no, I'm not accepting it. I'm waving off the match. It's a no contest. So in reality, every single person in that match could be considered a contender for the X Division title. So that leads 5 contenders for the X Division Championship, with one person being the champion, Josh Alexander. That's 6 wrestlers. Usually 6 is the amount of people that competes in a King of the Mountain match. King of the Mountain match, obviously it was a play off Jeff Jarrett's nickname back in the early TNA days, but the King of the Mountain match has been a staple of Slammiversary throughout the years. Most of the King of the Mountain matches that we have seen have taken place at Slammiversary. Now, I'm sure there might have been the odd occasional one that didn't take place at Slammiversary, but certainly the King of the Mountain match was a staple of that event. Not only was it the anniversary of Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling, whatever you want to call it, but also it featured that match. Now, if you've never seen a King of the Mountain match, essentially what it is, it's a reverse ladder match, whereby you have to pin one of your opponents. Your opponent then goes into the penalty box for a period of time. You're then eligible to have the championship, whatever you're going after, or whatever is up for grabs in that match. You have the championship, say it's the X Division Championship. You're eligible to take the championship, and then it's a reverse ladder match. Go up the ladder and hang it above the ring, and therefore you win the match and become the champion, retain your championship, or whatever. I still think that's the direction they're going in. Again, because I'm looking at the facts here and I'm saying, right, he said King of the Mountain, it's Slammiversary, we have 5 contenders, which makes a 6-person match. It all adds up. That all makes sense to me. An Ultimate X match, I mean, obviously it could be it, and PW Insider are speculating on it. I don't think they've heard anything. I think this is speculation on their part, which, again, you have to consider with all of these stories, whether it's actually fact, fiction, or speculation. I don't think it's fact by any stretch of the imagination. An Ultimate X match, look, Ultimate X match is great as well. It's a staple of the X Division. It's a staple of Impact Wrestling. It's a high-risk match. We've seen some incredible things and some real craziness in these Ultimate X matches. I think of Kazarian doing the big leg drop on Sheik Abdul-Bashir. I think of the time, when was it, Bound for Glory 2009, when Christopher Daniels was up on the Ultimate X ropes, and he fell backwards and nearly landed on his neck. It was horrible. It was horrifying. We've seen some incredible moments in the Ultimate X matches throughout the years. I think also of when, again, it was a suicide one. And I don't know who was playing suicide at the time. It might have been Kazarian, might have been Christopher Daniels when he did the big dive onto the middle of the X Division ropes and grabs the championship. So it could be that. I don't know. I think given the events, given the promos, given the amount of people, for me, it makes more sense for it to be a King of the Mountain match, but it could be an Ultimate X match. Either way, of course, it's going to be a fantastic match. And as I mentioned time and time again here on the channel, it's great to see the emphasis on the X Division, because for a while it had lost its identity, in my opinion. And for a while it maybe wasn't being, not taken seriously, but again, it had lost its identity. Considering, irrespective of what match type it is, whether it is King of the Mountain, whether it is Ultimate X, the people in that match alone just almost ensure that this match is going to be incredible. You know, Josh Alexander, P.T. Williams, Trey Miguel, Ace Austin, Chris Bay, Rohit Raju. I mean, that is creme de la creme, as they would say. That is the peak of the peak in terms of X Division athletes that Impact Wrestling has. So irrespective of what the match is, whether it is King of the Mountain, whether it is Ultimate X, that's very exciting. And I think it's going to be an excellent match. So time will only tell. Obviously, once we have an official announcement, which is coming at tomorrow, it's coming at 12 p.m. Eastern time. Once we get an official announcement on that, we'll be sure to talk about it here on the channel. And look, there's going to be so much Slammiversary stuff coming up over the course of the next 4 weeks or so as we get closer and closer to Slammiversary. Of course, we're going to be doing watch-alongs, post-show reaction streams, all that kind of stuff as we get closer to Slammiversary. So it's a very, very, very exciting time to be an Impact Wrestling fan, and a great time to subscribe as well. Bottom right-hand corner, smash a like on the video too. So we have some other things to talk about when it comes to Impact Wrestling. One being Steve Maclin, because the former Steve Cutler, former WWE superstar Steve Cutler, is set to make his debut this coming week on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. His in-ring debut. We've seen obviously a few vignettes in recent weeks hyping up his Impact debut, but the post-WWE career of Steve Maclin will officially begin this coming Thursday night on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. Now, his opponent has yet to be named. Now, of course, if you're not familiar, but you probably are, Maclin is the former WWE superstar Steve Cutler. He was released in February, and vignettes featuring his new character debuted 2 weeks ago on Impact. So I suppose it's slightly surprising in the sense that usually these vignettes would last 3, 4, 5, even 6 weeks or something like that. So only a couple of weeks of vignettes is certainly atypical, but I think Impact are just keen to get him on television as soon as possible, because they certainly know that he can be a big player for them going forward if he's booked correctly. Now, his first action since being released, he actually wrestled twice for the Massachusetts-based Beyond Wrestling on June 3rd, losing to Tony Deppen while defeating Teddy Goods. He is also working a Monster Factory show in late June, but that's nothing out of the ordinary. A lot of these Impact Wrestling contracts aren't exclusive. They allow you to work other dates for other independent promotions. We've seen several Impact stars work, for instance, Warrior Wrestling shows and other indie shows, so that's no surprise there. As I mentioned before, when talking about the Steve Maclin new character that they're certainly going for, as a fan of Marvel Comics, as a fan of Marvel television series, as a fan of Marvel Studios and all that kind of stuff, for me, it's very much a Punisher gimmick. I think they're really leaning into the Punisher. If you're not familiar with that, or you're not a Marvel fan or whatever, the Punisher, there's lots of different backstories of the Punisher. One of them is that it's a former military vet, former... is he a Marine or something like that, Special Forces, but it's certainly an overseas, and it depends on the conflict that they go for. Sometimes it's Vietnam, sometimes it's Afghanistan or Iraq. It depends which Punisher graphic novel you read. But eventually he comes back, and again, he takes out the criminals of the underworld, that kind of stuff. So he has a military background, but also he's not afraid of essentially killing people. He's not like most superheroes in that he doesn't really have a conscience, in essence, and he doesn't care about overstepping the line to, in his mind, rid the criminal underworld of criminals that are infesting New York or wherever he is based. And I think the Steve Maclin character is kind of based on that. If you look at the vignettes and you've seen any Punisher TV series, or you've seen any Punisher graphic novels or comics or anything like that, it's very much inspired by that, because obviously Steve Maclin does have the military background. That's what he played up when he was in WWE. as part of the Forgotten Sons gimmick. He played up that he had the military background in the same vein as Wesley Blake and Jackson Riker. But this one again kind of feels like there's a different edge to it. Again, I don't know what he's going to be portraying. We don't really know if he's going to be a babyface or a heel at this point. But again, it feels very much Punisher-like. And basically in these vignettes, we've seen him in, I guess, a bar, drinking Jameson, signing his Impact Wrestling contract. And again, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of person he goes after in Impact Wrestling. What is he trying to rid? Because if he's seriously playing off, the Punisher kind of vibe, then one would think that maybe he's going to be an anti-hero of sorts, trying to go after, I guess, the bad people of Impact Wrestling, I don't know, or the corruption in Impact Wrestling. Well, the corruption in Impact Wrestling is probably Don Callis and Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers. I don't know if Steve Maclin's going to be going after them, but it's certainly an interesting situation, and it's going to be fascinating to see who he goes up against, his characters going forward, his gimmicks going forward in the matches, especially as we get closer and closer to Slammiversary. Obviously, what a great time for Steve Maclin to debut. Ironically, of course, he is partners with Deonna Purrazzo in real life, and she made her debut, her Impact Wrestling debut, roughly around the same period of time last year, right before Slammiversary. It was a little bit earlier than Slammiversary, and she built up enough momentum to the point that when Slammiversary came around, she won the Knockouts Championship. So I don't think Steve Maclin's going to be winning any championships at Slammiversary, but who knows? Maybe Wesley Blake comes into Impact Wrestling. Of course, he was released by WWE back in April. He would be eligible to sign with Impact right before Slammiversary. So who's to say that we don't have a Forgotten Sons reunion, if you will, just before Slammiversary, and the Forgotten Sons become the new Impact Tag Team Champions? Certainly with Steve Maclin, for me, there's a real element of intrigue there. I'm fascinated to see what they do with him going forward. There is an argument, and before he made his vignette debut a couple of weeks ago, the report, I think it was PW Insider that reported this as well. They certainly have ties in Impact Wrestling. There's no doubt about that. They said that the perception from their point of view was that this was a guy that didn't get the opportunity that he deserved in WWE. And that's maybe a fair assessment. I don't know if anyone really deserves anything. Certainly one could argue, given the talent that he has, he didn't maybe get the fair shake of things in WWE. He certainly isn't the first, and he won't be the last. I think his story in WWE is just really unfortunate of a guy that's, I mentioned before, in NXT, I wasn't the biggest Forgotten Sons fan. I don't know if that's just because I couldn't really latch on to it. I don't know. They had good matches, good tag team matches, all that kind of stuff, with the likes of the Street Profits, etc. I couldn't really latch on to the gimmick, but it was what it was. I thought they were a decent tag team, a decent faction. And look, getting called up to SmackDown, despite it being during the pandemic last year, despite it being in the Performance Center when the Performance Center was empty and all that kind of stuff, being called up to SmackDown on Fox, it's WWE's A show. It's WWE's biggest audience that they get per week is on that Fox show. That was a big deal. It was a big deal. It was a big opportunity. And then it got ruined. And it got taken away by no fault of his own. It got taken away by Jackson Riker. Jackson Riker posted the tweet in support of the previous president. A lot of people were upset about that in WWE. Now, as I've mentioned before, I'm hardly a supporter of that regime or that kind of politics, but I don't think anyone should lose their job over their political beliefs unless it obviously, in the case of Drake Woods, it actually crosses over into your professionalism in the workplace. And you could argue maybe it had with Jackson Riker or whatever, but because of the tweet that he posted, there was a lot of heat on him backstage from a lot of the locker room. Most importantly, a lot of the locker room didn't want to work with Jackson Riker, and by proxy, they didn't want to work with the Forgotten Sons. So the Forgotten Sons were taken off of television and taken away. Jackson Riker, he got back onto television. He's the only one, by the way, that's still with the company, and he's getting a babyface push right now, which is madness, absolute madness. So the guy that gets a load of heat is now expected to be cheered by an audience of people when they return to live touring. I don't think that's going to happen. Not at all. Either way, Steve Maclin and Wesley Blake, they get another opportunity. They're called up to SmackDown once again. Big opportunity. They're going to be in a faction with King Corbin, Knights of the Lone Wolf. They're going to be his henchmen, I guess. And then Steve Maclin attends a New Year's Eve party with several other Impact Wrestling talents, it must be added. The likes of Rich Young. I'm mixing together Rich Swann, Sue Young. It's been a long day. And, he contracted COVID because of it, tested positive for COVID, and Vince McMahon was furious by this. He was furious that Steve Maclin had attended a party and I guess not socially distanced and wasn't wearing a mask and contracted COVID and could possibly pass it on to the rest of the roster, and he fired Steve Maclin because of that. Now, bear in mind, this is a time which you are performing shows during a pandemic. There has to be an element of expectation that people are going to contract the virus. You can't control everywhere that they go. maybe should he have been more careful? Absolutely. Everyone should have been more careful throughout this entirety of the process. But to fire someone for contracting COVID, especially considering there were several people on his roster and, in his company, on his payroll, that didn't even believe it was a thing, didn't believe in wearing masks, didn't believe in any of it. Certainly high people. There was Kevin Dunn around this time last year that was telling people at the Performance Center during those TV tapings, don't wear masks because we can't hear you talk or we can't hear your expressions. What a load of rubbish that was. So yeah, and what about that? And there was a period of time at the Performance Center where they weren't even testing people to come in. Just come in, have a temperature check, fill out a questionnaire, you can be done. Yet they fired Steve Maclin for testing positive for COVID. That seems fair. That seems really fair. So obviously, as I mentioned, he didn't get maybe the opportunity that he deserved or was warranted, but it looks like he's going to get that in Impact Wrestling. So that's very good to see, and I'm excited to see what they do with him going forward. Now, some really sad news that I wanted to talk about here, and that's Don West, former TNA color commentator and announcer. Don West has really shared some real sad and horrible news here. Former TNA on-air talent and commentator Don West has been diagnosed with brain lymphoma. Now, West's radio show, The Don West Show, on News Radio 560 KPQ in Washington State, has been on hiatus as of late, and West issued a letter this week to announce that he was recently diagnosed with a brain lymphoma and will begin immediate treatment. West said he's hoping the chemotherapy treatment will help him heal faster so he can get back on the radio soon. WWE Hall of Famer and TNA founder Jeff Jarrett took to Twitter and sent prayers to his good friend and former employee. He said, quote, "Prayers up for my great friend Don West. Just hung up the phone with him and he's in great spirits and ready to take on this challenge." West, of course, worked for TNA from 2002 to 2012. He returned in 2017 to work the merchandise department. He also did guest commentary at Impact's 2017 Slammiversary pay-per-view. Now, this is what the statement that Don West released. This is how the news broke yesterday. He said, quote, "Hello, everybody. Don West here to tell you about how disappointed I am to not be talking about the Seattle Seahawks, the Mariners, the Watachi Wild, and everything else we love to talk about every day on the Don West Show. Many of you have wondered where I have been and why this show is on hiatus, so I want to share the news directly with you. I've been diagnosed with a brain lymphoma and will begin immediate treatment. I want to thank my wife Terry for her love and support, my family, and everybody that works at Cherries Creek Media and KPQ. I also want to thank the Don West Show's incredible sponsors and my friends for all the prayers that are coming my way. I am praying the chemotherapy will help me heal faster, and hopefully I'll be back on the radio soon. I can't wait until this is all over and I can be back with you all again. I love you all, Don West." So absolutely, horrible news. And I completely echo what everyone's been saying on social media. I did a tweet yesterday and so many people responded saying that they hoped he gets well. And I absolutely echo that. Here's hoping he has a full recovery and he can get back to being on the radio and doing what he does best. And that's being Don West. Don West was such a unique character in TNA wrestling. And, people have maybe their Don West clips over the years and all that kind of stuff, but I always found him incredibly entertaining, and his energy and his passion was without question. That was the thing with him. His energy and passion was without question. Maybe his pro wrestling knowledge might not have been the best, and maybe he might not have known certain moves, but his passion, his energy really helped TNA wrestling in the mid-2000s, arguably their peak years, really stand out. His passion of those matches inside the Impact Zone and those early days of TNA Impact on Spike and even Fox Sports and all of that sort of stuff. Don West, for me, I think he's underrated. I always felt he was underrated because I always really loved his passion. And his passion was for everything. Whether it was, commentary for pro wrestling or whether it was doing his merchandise sales. Apparently at live events, he'd have the grab bag and doing all that kind of stuff. Don West, by all accounts, you don't hear a bad thing about the guy. Just passion. Such a nice guy. And for me, growing up watching TNA wrestling again in the mid-2000s, during their peak years, during their heyday, during the time where there was so much hope that they could compete with WWE, Don West was a big part of that. Him and Mike Tenay were just such a great announced team. And you go back and watch those shows on Impact Plus, or you see these highlights of great moments in Impact Wrestling history, and Don West is the soundtrack to that along with Mike Tenay. So here's hoping he has a full recovery. I've got everything crossed for the guy again because I've never heard a bad word about him. And here's hoping he has a full recovery, and we can only wish him the best. We really, really do. Finally, we have some update when it comes to Moose. Now, we've spoken about this a few times here, so this is kind of nothing new, but Fightful Select have essentially confirmed what a lot of people have been saying, and that is Moose has re-signed with the company. He has put pen to paper at this point, and he's sticking around. Fightful Select, which of course is Fightful's Patreon service, so be sure to check that out and subscribe to them. They are reporting that Moose is indeed hanging around in Impact Wrestling. Now, Wrestling Observer first reported the news that Moose had signed a new contract. Well, Fightful was able to learn of some significant details about the negotiations and the details of his contract. This is something that I said we didn't have information about, but now we do. Fightful has learned from other companies that there was significant interest in bringing Moose in, but as of now, they're able to confirm that they're not able to confirm if this led to any serious talks. Now, the new contract with Moose is said to be for 2 years, which is what I said I thought it would be, and will carry Moose into the summer of 2023. So Moose isn't going anywhere. He's sticking around with Impact Wrestling until the summer of 2023. The contract is said to be a significant improvement over his last deal, though we don't have the exact details on the financial terms. But Fightful have been told by the Impact side of things that Moose figures into their plans in a major way. So there you go. Moose is sticking around. He has put pen to paper. As I said, he's going to be around for 2 more years, and he's got a significant improvement in the financial side of his contract, which is a big deal. I spoke about this before. Moose sticking around, Impact being able to convince Moose to stay is a massive, massive deal for Impact Wrestling. It's a massive deal financially, of course, for Moose, but it's a big deal because there was interest. And like I said before, I hate to be one of those people that goes, I told you so, see, I told you so, I told you this was going to happen, all this kind of stuff. But I thought Moose was going to leave. I really did, because I did think there was going to be interest from WWE, AEW, other companies, and there was. But credit to Impact, because it's just the latest name they have convinced to stay around and convinced to re-sign. Whether it's Sami Callihan last year, whether it's Jordan Grace earlier this year, and whether it's now Moose, these are big players in the world of Impact Wrestling. And Impact Wrestling, as I mentioned time and time again, there is this misconception, this misnomer about Impact Wrestling that they're not financially well backed, they don't have a lot of money. That's not true. Anthem Sports and Entertainment is a very wealthy company. And if push comes to shove, they can offer decent money. They can offer certainly, livable terms, and certainly money that you can make a good living out of. And Moose is the latest example of that. This is why Impact Wrestling had negotiations with Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega prior to them signing with AEW, is because they can offer a good financial package, and that's what they can for Moose. And I think Moose, some people can say, oh, he's taken the easy option because he stayed with Impact, he didn't take a risk going to WWE or AEW. But again, my advice to him, had he asked at the time, I would have said, do you want to go into that WWE system? Because who knows how that's going to pay out. You might have a good run in NXT, but the main roster, who knows? AEW, again, you could have success there. That's a bloated roster. That's a difficult roster to succeed on, certainly with the names that are there. Or you haven't achieved it all in Impact Wrestling yet. You haven't been a world champion. You've only really started to hit the sort of peak of his abilities in terms of Impact Wrestling over the last year or so with his reign as the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. The improvement that Moose has seen over the course of the last year has been ginormous, absolutely ginormous. Whether it's his promos, whether it's his matches, whether it's just physically becoming in the best shape of his life. So I think there's way more for Moose to do, and 2 years is around the right time to do it. So I think it's knocked on guaranteed that Moose will eventually become the Impact World Champion. That's a certainty at this point. And to be honest, I'm sure that those assurances were probably made to Moose. Now, when is that going to happen? Probably not at Slammiversary. That looks to be Sami Callihan versus Kenny Omega. I still think Moose is going to either be feuding with Chris Sabin in a match at Slammiversary, which I'm not too much sold on. I still think we could see Moose and Chris Sabin versus the Young Bucks in a tag team match at Slammiversary. Now, that's a big match. So again, maybe those kind of assurances have been made to Moose. But I would be stunned that maybe, say, by Bound for Glory this year, that Moose isn't the Impact World Champion. And I still will contend that maybe Moose is the person to defeat Kenny Omega for that Impact World Championship. And again, maybe that takes place at Bound for Glory. We know fans are going to return at Slammiversary. Maybe we have a full venue of fans when it comes to Bound for Glory. Fans return at Slammiversary between 60 to 150. But possibly we could be looking at a situation whereby by Bound for Glory in October, we have 200, 300, 400 fans in attendance or whatever venue they're at. maybe that's the time for Moose to defeat Kenny Omega. So a big signing for Impact and some massive news for them. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the Impact news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.